Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show, Arlene Johnson, welcome to Windows on the World.
Thank you, Mark. I am so delighted to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me on. People probably would like to know, who am I?
You have a website, truedemocracy.net, which has a vast amount of information on, but just tell us a bit about your background.
I was not your typical student. I went to college, like the same kind of colleges that the 16-year-olds go to here in England, for 1 year. And I really didn't think that I would be able to make it, so I dropped out. And I had somebody that I was engaged to, so I went to work. But then I sort of regretted not having finished college. So about 15 years later, when I was like 38 years old, I went back, and then I went back to the same college from which I had dropped out, and I graduated from it. And then I got accepted into UCLA. Well, that was the best thing that could have happened to me, aside from my favorite professor who was at that college that I went back to when I was 38, because I met someone who knew someone very, very famous in Iran, and he shared with me information that, interestingly, people here in England know, and people on the continent know, and in Scandinavia know, but not Americans. Now, isn't that strange? That you can have freedom of the press in the United States, which is where I was born, but people don't know the truth?
Well, I think that depends on what you mean by freedom of the press. I wouldn't say there's freedom of the press anywhere, really, in the Western world, not in the last 15 years anyway. But there is meant to be a free press, although in Britain they've pretty much shut that down. They've pretty much achieved that now, as far as the mainstream goes.
Basically, up until 9/11, the presses in Western Europe were much more forthcoming with the truth, because people over here know the information that I know, but Americans don't. And so you would think that with freedom of the press being in the Bill of Rights, in part of the Constitution of the United States, that the press would be more forthcoming there, but it is not. So I started learning the secrets in 1983, and by 1993, I had learned so much that I understood the mentality of those who are betraying decent people here in England and really all over the world, virtually every day. And so I thought, I got to get this information out to people. So I started trying to get a literal magazine out to people when I was living in New York City. But I went broke trying to do that.
That's quite a common thing when you tell the truth, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Thank you. And so then when my parents passed away, they left me their whole estate. So it gave me a new lease on life. I was again able to start doing what I did, and that was in 1998. And in 2001, I launched internationally to as many countries as I could possibly find people that lived in them to know what I was doing, because it's so important for people around the world to know what's really going on. Well, in terms of like my educational achievements, I graduated from UCLA with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, and then that was in 1987. And then in 1990, I returned to academia to work on a Master's of Library Science, and that was a really good decision that I made, because it was as a reference librarian that I learned what I consider to be the biggest cover-up of the 20th century, an event so huge that it betrayed every decent human being around the world.
Maybe we can go into that first. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, I certainly can. While I was a student at UCLA, I never checked out this book, but it was called Inside the Company by Philip A.G. And when I would have spare time, I would go downstairs in one of the 19 libraries on the UCLA campus and read as much as I had time to read of that book. That book is about the CIA. And in that book, Philip A.G. States that the CIA is in every country. So now this was in the mid 80s. So in 1993, when one of my students, where I was the reference librarian, said, quote, President Kennedy was assassinated because he wanted to disband the FBI and the CIA, unquote, adding, it's in the Argentinian press. Well, it is in the Argentinian press, and I actually went to Buenos Aires in 1995 and in 2000 to accumulate the documentation of what my students said. And I brought that back, and that's the lead-off story in my first edition, because that was the piece of history that put the puzzle pieces together for me, enabling me to understand the mentality of those who are running the show around the world. And so that degree was very good idea that I had, because I already knew so much that when my student said that to me that night, when there was himself and three other students and I standing in a circle on the library floor, I knew that what he said was true, mainly because of Philip Agee's book. And so I just thought, holy cow, how much luckier can I get? And I thought, I've got to get this out to people. Well, that's what I did. And that was in March 2001. Finally, after all those years of struggling to get the truth out to people, and get it into the schools. It belongs in the high schools and in the colleges and universities. And I tried as hard as I could to get it into them. What's really interesting is, and at that time I didn't know this, is the schools from kindergarten all the way up through university, graduate school, and the various, professional schools like medical school is all being controlled by the Rockefeller Foundation. And anyway, so I sent out approximately 20,000 letters in the post to, to superintendents of the public schools in the United States. And I thought they would be as happy to learn the truth as I was. But that was not the case. Out of 20,000, 5 superintendents subscribed. One in Arizona, one in New Mexico, one in Missouri, one in Ohio, and one in North Dakota. That's it.
So what did that tell you about America?
At that point, I didn't really know. I would find out later. And when 9/11 happened, which was 6 months after I had launched, I didn't react the way that other people reacted, I became livid with rage because this would not have happened if the truth had been known to the parents of the students in the schools. I had so many plans for, in the United States, they have what they call the PTA. It's a Parent Teachers Association.
Yes, they have that over here as well.
Okay. And I planned on having, people, making copies of the page that makes my work unique. It's called the demand page, and it's at the end of every single edition I have ever published. And folding it in thirds and putting a staple in it or a piece of tape and putting a postage stamp on it and sending it off to the Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C., who would have got so many copies of that page that he would not have even been able to walk in his office. But that didn't happen. So when I launched, which was after the second intifada of the Palestinians started, where the poor Palestinian people have been so totally betrayed, murdered, and every single day, that they started a second intifada. I said, I cannot wait any longer to get this truth out. So I launched, and I said to the people in the first email that I sent them, well, we're just going to have to try to make this boycott work ourselves because the schools are not cooperating. And so needless to say, the boycott has never worked because there's not enough people to exert that much power over the Congress of the United States. But at least my work was out there, and I was trying. That's all you can do in life is try.
Well, yeah, it is. And your website is very, very diverse and comprehensive in a lot of different subjects. I'd recommend anyone go to that. It's truedemocracy.net.
Yes, and click on the icon that says magazine, because that's where my work sits. I'll never forget the first time I was in England was in 2005 and 6 for 6 months. And I was basically in London, where I walked along Charing Cross Road and the road that connects with Charing Cross Road that leads over, I'm trying to remember the name of that road. And there was a Tesco Express, and I went in there, and I mentioned to the manager of it, and the next day he said, "Where is it?" I tried to find it. So then I started telling everybody that you need to click on the icon that says magazine so you can find my editions. And that's because of him. So in that first edition, in addition to the Kennedy, those two reasons why Kennedy was assassinated, I also have a couple of rather unknown organizations. One is called the Trilateral Commission, and the other one is called Bilderberg Group, which I exposed for the first time of what would be numerous articles on each of them.
That's become quite a big thing now, the Bilderberg Group. In fact, the authorities got so aware of it that they decided to organise their own Bilderberg Festival for us all as conspiracy theorists to meet up. Yeah, it was paid for by, I think it was paid for by Goldman Sachs, according to the police, which was very nice of them. So we all met up in a field down, got cordoned off, and got refused water as well, which was quite, I suppose it's a good thing for Agenda 21 to get us used to being refused water. We're going to take a short break, Arlene. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Arlene Johnson, welcome back to Windows on the World. We're going to talk in this second section about the Trilateral Commission. Carry on.
Yes. Thanks, Mark. Yeah. In all humility, I think I may know more about the Trilateral Commission than most people, because when I was working on my master's degree, I did follow-up research on this organization that was formed by David Rockefeller. Remember, the Rockefeller Foundation controls the schools, and Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1973. And I uncovered an unpublished dissertation on the Trilateral Commission's effect on the banking industry. I mean, this is an industry that affects virtually everyone around the world. There are very few people that do not have a bank account. So I told the man that successfully defended that dissertation to obtain his PhD at the University of Kentucky that I would publish his dissertation, and he gave me written permission to do so. Unfortunately, I've never had enough money in order to be able to do that. But if one was to log on to the About Us section of my website, you can read that the Trilateral Commission's effect on the banking industry would be the first book that I would publish. That didn't actually come to pass, but be that as it may, I did my first research on their effect on the Middle East because of the man that knew the Shah that I met because I was a student at UCLA. And so I did the research and I turned in a paper to a professor at UCLA who has her PhD in political science. And she gave me an A for my effort. And she told me that she turned my references over to another student. She told me this in 1987, and I don't think I have come down from the high of that since, in all these years, because it was a real honor that she did that. It turned out that the information that he told me has been in all the Western European presses. In other words, the CIA deposed the Shah. There are several reasons why they deposed him. One of them was that he was trying to industrialize Iran, and the elite don't want any more competition. If anything, they want monopoly. So that was one major reason why they had to get rid of him, even though he was put in power basically by the CIA in 1953.
Are we're talking about Mossadegh here?
Yes, I'm talking. Yeah,
Yes.
Mossadegh. My good friend in Los Angeles taught me that Mossadegh lived under house arrest, but he lived until he had a natural death. The people wanted the Shah back. That's why it was one of the easiest coups that the CIA could pull. The Shah. I've wanted to write a book about the Shah for years because he was a very misunderstood man. I believe in my heart that he was a victim of his times. He did not want communism. He fought. He had an army. My friend was in the army before he came to Los Angeles to go to school at UCLA, and so he taught me about that, and a bunch of other stuff about the Shah. And then I actually met somebody in New York whose uncle had contracts with the Shah to develop Iran. And so that's a second source, stating basically the same things that the one in Los Angeles had stated. So I know it's true. And so So that research is in my first edition as an article that I modified so that it would be a little bit easier for people to understand. But there are many sentences in the article that are exactly the same as what was in the research. And people can, if they want to read the research, they can do that too, because that's on my site too, under the icon that says research. Very basic stuff here.
Iran's had their leaders taken out twice by the West.
In 1979 was when the CIA deposed the Shah. The Shah was also giving grants of money to poor nations like Yemen and certain African nations, and that the elite didn't tolerate, because they don't want nations to get a hold of their debt and start paying down the principal. They want them to borrow just so they can pay the interest. And the Shah would have prevented that. So that was another reason why they had to get him out of power. Because Muslims, they're very interesting people. I published about Islam, but the Muslim people are they're very nice people. I know quite a lot of Muslims. In Los Angeles, there's the largest community of Iranians outside of Iran in the entire world. When I lived there, which was until 1990, there was about 250,000 Iranians living in the general LA area. So it's more than anywhere else in the world outside of Iran. And Ali was one of those, of course. But the Trilateral Commission gets into all kinds of things. They're into agriculture, and I fortunately got to live in Canada for over a year. And while I was there, which was in St. John, New Brunswick, a man who had been betrayed by Monsanto came to talk, and after he was finished with his talk, I went up to him and I asked him if he knew about the Trilateral Commission, and he said, "Oh yes, I know about it." And I said, "Yes, I know too, because the basic book that I used for my research on the Trilateral Commission's effect on the Middle East also mentioned about agriculture." So this poor man grew canola on his farm in Saskatchewan, and he was literally put out of business. And so I told him, I said, "I'm going to be publishing an edition devoted to the family farmer." And I did do that in my 15th edition. So his story is the lead-off story in that edition. So if anybody's interested in agriculture, you can read how harmful Monsanto is with what they're doing.
I think that's become quite common knowledge now, and quite a lot of countries are becoming aware of it. I think there's an awareness of this in Eastern Europe and Russia.
Yes, definitely. Monsanto with its GMO has been actually banned in Hungary, and I say good on the Hungarian government. I was so pleased when I found that out, because that's what they should be in every single country around the world. It's absolutely disgusting situation. GMO is a killer. We've got to fight it here in England too, because people will die here of it if it's allowed to be grown in this country, and I completely against it. If anybody tells you that GMO is not harmful, they either do not know what they're talking about, or they're part of the agenda.
And that's the big problem. There's many people who are part of the agenda, and they work for these corporations. This thing about the GM food is very serious, and of course they're using us as lab rats, because they don't really even test it on rats. It's actually gone into many different areas of the food supply in America, and they're trying to stop labeling.
Yes, right. They don't want it labeled. I wonder how many Americans would it really matter with them? Because the people in the United States, really, there are so many apathetic people there. It's really pathetic. I have one friend in Colorado who is very, very savvy, and she even has a YouTube channel, and she gets very distraught about how apathetic the people are that live around her. So it's, I just hope that people start to wake up. And that's why I'm so grateful for shows like yours to help people understand these people that are doing this have no conscience whatsoever. If they can kill a man who wants to do good, which was what President Kennedy wanted to do, he wanted peace. He wanted a joint Soviet Union and American space program. Oh, the powers that be did not want that. And there were many other things that he wanted. We would have had peace if it had been for him, but they don't want peace. So they want, in fact, right now they want another world war. And
well, that's exactly right. And war is business, and it's
absolutely
reduction.
Right.
Yeah.
That is absolutely right. They make a lot of money off of war. Let me give you an example. World War II, France was funded by the Rothschilds there. Germany was funded by the Rothschild there. England was funded by the Rothschild there. But this is not grants. These are loans at interest. And and so then the countries just go broke trying to pay back this interest, and the people are taxed, heavily to pay back this interest. And that's money that takes money out of circulation, if you can even call it money. It's really debt, because the money is printed up and lent to the country at interest, and that is what people refer to as debt, which makes a great deal of sense. So what you're walking around in your pocket with is our pound notes that are debt.
And this all came from our great friends, the Knights Templar, who are now the Knights of Malta, who run the whole show. Yeah,
I can agree with you on that. And the Vatican has a large say in it too. I've got articles about the Vatican in my work. I can't quite remember which editions they're in, but if anybody can just Google anything, and then if you put www.truedemocracy.net in quotes, then you should be able to find whatever you are looking for, because it's necessary to put my website in quotes, because there is also a True Democracy Party. That is not me. That's someone else. And they do some good work. I have read a few of their articles, but that's not me. Mine is just simply truedemocracy.net.
That's great, Arlene. We're going to take another short break. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
In your opinion, do you think the jury was led?
It's not mine to say.
Very diplomatic.
Tell the viewers a bit about what happened to you.
Well, they bribed 3 criminals to come in and give hearsay.
If a bomb went off in London and took 92 lives, yeah, would you want to be on the payroll of that?
It's more based on models and projections.
It's all over, bother shouting.
In order to get me in prison, they probably broke, a couple dozen laws.
Free Yolanda. Y'all planted drugs on Yolanda, and we're going to get her released and get the crooked cops busted.
That gave all the officers time for their adrenaline to slow down so we wouldn't get shot.
Just for the viewers out there who may not know about this story, when did you discover this pyramid?
In April of 2005, I first came to little Bosnian town of Visoko.
When you drive someone to take their own life, like the CSA have done, I mean, that's an abomination.
Thanks for being on Windows on the World.
Peace to London.
The rest is history, and everybody called me delirious after that.
We have in the studio David Compan, NHS electrician just released after being sectioned under the Mental Health Act. If you weren't with anybody, you'd have just disappeared. Nobody would know where you are, and you can be detained indefinitely.
That's right. Thank you very much for all your support. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Welcome back to Windows on the World, and now we're going to talk about another subject, TIs, targeted individuals. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, well, the first TI, or targeted individual, I became aware of was way back, and I published a story in March of 2003. This poor man, he served in Vietnam, and he came back, and the government wanted him to deal drugs, and he said no. So they targeted him with electromagnetic weapons. And I have his whole story in my 9th edition. And somebody that was, a supporter of my work said, I don't believe it. So in January 2011, I was given the distinct honor of going to Parliament here in London, in which 3 MPs were interested in TI's plight. And so I listened to the TI stories that were there that day. And at the end of this, I stood up and I said, for any of you who don't know, I am a publisher, and I will publish any story of any TI that presents their story to me in my 36th edition. So I accumulated about 35 or 36 stories, which I felt and feel that would prove that there is such a thing as a TI, because most people don't believe it. It's beyond what their minds can wrap itself around in life. But when you understand the mentality of those that are controlling our lives, I do believe it. And when you have that many stories from TIs all over the world, one of whom is in China, many of whom are in the United States, and some of whom are here in England, then you proved that these atrocities are happening to these people that are just like you and me.
Yeah, well, this is being implemented on a massive scale, I believe, because
Absolutely.
I've been a victim of the so-called people who work in the security industry and so-called ex-police, and they've targeted me for putting out information. I then found out that there's plenty of other people who get much worse treatment. I mean, this is very minor stuff that we've had, but
definitely, I was targeted, but I was targeted in a different way, and that's how my 2 books. I culminated in writing 2 books that are completely documented. But I was not targeted with electromagnetic weapons or chemical weapons or voice to skull, which is when you hear voices in your brain that nobody around you can hear, or stalked by the government, trying to run me off the road if I was to drive a car, which I used to do. And so I want people to understand that this can happen to them too if we don't stop it from happening to the ones that it's happening to now, which include about 500,000 people in the United States alone. And then there's targeted individuals everywhere else around the world too. So I really wanted to make a point of drawing your audience's attention to the targeted individual plight, because those stories are sitting, for free on my website in my 36th edition, and they make for rather interesting reading because the people are diversely located. I've got one in Northern California, one in Florida, one in Texas. These people in the beginning, they didn't know about each other, but yet the stories are similar. So, and also there's an organization that was formed called Freedom from Covert harassment and surveillance. It's an acronym. It's F like Frank, C like Charlie, H like Harry, and S like Sam. And that was infiltrated by the man that's at the head of it now, a man named Derek Robinson, who told me personally that he worked for NSA, which is the National, NSA. That's
National Security Agency.
National Security Agency. Thank you, Mark. Which is, if you look in my third edition, you'll see that the National Security Administration is a shadow government agency. It's not constitutional. It shouldn't exist. And so right away, I knew that this was not a man I could trust. And then one targeted individual who lives in Southern California, he figured him out, and so he explained it to me. And there's a lady, she wanted to have a world day for TIs. Her name is Deborah Dupre. You may recognize her because she writes for a news source where they publish her articles.
Yes.
And she wanted to have this World Day, and Derek Robinson, who is the head of Freedom, which some people refer to that organization as Freedom, was thwarting her in every way that he could. And we have a TI who became a perp here in England too, who lives out in Plymouth, and he was thwarting it as well. So it never really got off the ground, unfortunately.
Well, I think this is the main thing with any kind of information that needs to be put out there. We're basically living under communism in this country. There's spies everywhere.
Yeah.
If people think that's a fantasy, then they're obviously living in a daydream, because these people are out there, and actually they're doing it through local authorities. Councils all over the country recruit people to go and spy on people. Councils will intercept your phone calls, your internet, and in this new sustainable development housing, which is the very high density flats that are being built everywhere,
yes,
they recommend that every single one of these flats has surveillance and overlook, and that means inclusion in all your affairs.
That's right.
The activities of the local police and the council who work together. So everybody's going to be spied on, and many of these new developments have huge cell phone masts built within feet of them, and that's happening around here. And this takes us into this targeted individual and also the spying, because Deborah Tavares has reported this, that people are being targeted through these cell phone towers. I have no doubt that they are.
I have no doubt either. She does some really brilliant work. I remember her interviewing Barry Trower. And
I've also interviewed Barry on the show, yes.
Yeah, he's a good man. Is he still alive?
Oh, yes. Good.
Yeah. Because I thought I heard that he had passed away. But yeah, he's a good man as far as I can tell. So anyway, so if people want to read those articles in the 36th edition, I would very much appreciate it. And then at the very end of that, if people would print out that very last page and send it to the Speaker of the House, that's Speaker now, we would go a long way to ending this atrocity that is being perpetuated on these people. That, people have died. In fact, 8 days before I launched that edition, we had a suicide because one of the people whose story is in that edition, Pam Anderson, she committed suicide because she couldn't take it anymore. And it was just a really bad upheaval for the whole TI community because there might have been copycat. I haven't heard that there were any copycat suicides after Pam killed herself, but there was some real fear by people that care about the TI community, that there would be more people that would kill themselves, because it is just a horrendous situation for these people. And they're no different than you or I. They are not mentally ill. They are as sane as I am. And believe me, I'm totally sane.
Well, that's why we're talking just to you right now, Arlene. So we're going to take another short break, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Okay. All right.
Our next guest, Nazrin, was evicted from her own property. This was due to a management company issuing charges which she disputed.
A lady called for assistance from the police, and she's now been arrested, handcuffed, took out of her own home.
The student loans, the debt book has been sold. All of what we've talked about is coming your way.
Sergeant?
Have a seat. I don't actually necessarily go into a police station at this time.
What has she been arrested for?
Well, that video was very shocking because Nazrin was actually peacefully occupying her own property, and she was arrested for breach of the peace in her own house.
It's very painful to watch, because in that instance I realised something terrible is happening in this country.
We did a show about people getting their doors kicked in by the police on behalf of private interests without proper court warrants, and this is actual fact. This is happening.
It's illegal and it's corrupt, and you have to ask yourself, why the people who are willing to bust in people's doors, what the hell happened to them?
You actually called me after they were smashing the door.
Yeah. We actually got a phone call into their press office, and first of all they said the police would never do that. However, they've been caught on video doing just that. The second time we called, they said if the police did that, it would be criminal damage. So you've just witnessed criminal damage by the police.
Okay, Arlene Johnson, welcome back to Windows on the World. In this last section of this particular show, we're going to be talking about health issues.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. The biggest health issue of many, and I can talk about others too, because there's cures for virtually every disease there is. But when people are told that they have cancer, they just, they lose it. They become so afraid that they think that they need to listen to their doctor and do what their doctor says. And I actually eliminated somebody from my address book because he said you're not listening to what the doctor said. Well, let me tell you something. The Rockefeller Foundation doesn't only control education, they control the medical profession.
I think a lot of people who are listening to this show will know that, but I think more people should be aware of it. Quite right.
Yes, right. Well, if everybody isn't aware of it, there isn't anything that the elite do not control. They control everything, and that includes illness. And the cancer industry is an industry. They have no desire to cure people because there's no money when people are healthy. But when people are ill, even here in England, where NHS is free to go to, where you can have chemotherapy for free, you don't have to pay for it as you do in America. The doctors in Great Britain are being paid at $64 million a year when they put their patients on drugs. And I've done a lot of research on this issue now because there's someone very precious to me who lives in Leeds who is terminally ill with lung cancer. And I have another friend who is very near to me here in Southampton who is battling his own case of cancer. It's called squamous cell carcinoma. It's a very aggressive cancer that manifested in a tumor on my friend's nose, on the left side, near his eye. And he made me aware of a website that I have been in the process of reading because it's a massive website that goes into all the cures for cancer. And so I actually developed a little poll for people. Is there a cure for cancer? And I've asked total strangers this question when I've been out and about. And most people don't think that there is, because that's what they're being told by the press.
Well, every time they go out, they see a poster which says cancer research, don't they?
That's right. That's right. Put your money, donate money for cancer research. Rubbish. The money is not going for research. It's going for more brainwashing. And the doctors, if they deviate, and I can give you names of doctors that have deviated, they call them quacks and they discredit them right and left. There's one doctor that has cured brain cancer in children in Houston, Texas. The FDA has tried to put him in prison for 290 years. There's even congressional testimony on this. I've watched it. It's a video of 1 hour and 47 minutes, and in part of that video, the doctor's patients, parents have testified before Congress that he has cured their child. Several, numerous parents have testified this in congressional testimony. And so if you are, or a loved one of yours is diagnosed with cancer, there are cures. You do not have to undergo surgery, which causes cancer to metastasize, or chemotherapy, which kills your immune system. And I have a friend who works in General Hospital here, and she said that chemotherapy takes the immune system down to nothing. She is 100% correct. So that when, not if, the cancer returns, because our bodies are always encountering, carcinogens, which cause, cancer cells to develop, the immune system has no way to fight it off, and the person dies. It's so completely unnecessary. And it's even caused by root canals, which you wouldn't think that your dental issues would cause you to get cancer, but they do. Or extractions that are not properly done. I just recently became aware of a couple. They're both dentists, and they're actually in Bedfordshire. They do charge quite a bit, but they do extractions and other dental procedures the proper way.
And if I expand on that a bit, Arlene, because many people have root canals. I had one which went disastrously wrong, and the whole tooth fell out, but it left a bit of the tooth there. So I think this is a pretty common thing that people would like to be aware of. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yes, it's a very common thing, because a root canal gets them paid more than pulling the tooth does. So they'll do a root canal. But 97% of people who get cancer have had a root canal. And my parents were no exception. My parents both died of cancer, and they both had root canal, at least one. My mother, I believe, had 2 root canals done. I believe my dad had 1 root canal done. It is a major cause of breast cancer, and both men and women get breast cancer. It's not just women.
That's right. Well, I think it's been steadily increasing over the past 20 to 30 years, breast cancer in males.
Yes, and cancer as a whole has increased. Now in the United States, 1 in 2 men get cancer and 1 in 3 women get cancer. And I do not see that it's any different here in England, because the lifestyle is basically the same.
Absolutely correct, it is. And with all the toxins that we are bombarding ourselves with, and that's not including the electromagnetic radiation from Wi-Fi and cell towers. If people don't think that's dangerous, they really do need to do some research on that, because it's been proven to be. And we intend to cover that a lot on the show. We are putting together some very interesting research and evidence on that. But
Yeah.
just to round that up, Arlene, could you explain how cancers are caused by root canals?
When the dentist drills down to remove it's like the pulp that's in the middle of the tooth, there are microbes that are left behind or can get in there, and they're trapped, and then they ultimately get into the bloodstream through, and the way I understand it is if they do a thermography, I'm not sure that that's the correct word, but I think it may be. You can see a red blob in where the root canal was done, and then a fine red line that leads on the meridian to where the breast is, and that causes the cancer there. So the microbes, which are a fungus, a bacteria, a parasite, or a virus. Let's see. I think that's the four things that constitute a microbe. Cause the cells to become cancerous, and by the time people realize it, it's gotten much worse. I mean, you hardly ever hear of a stage 1 cancer, but you're much more apt to hear of a stage 3 or a stage 4. Stage 4 is terminal.
Well, that's very interesting, Arlene, because a friend of mine had stage 4 throat cancer, cured himself completely with Gerson therapy.
Yes, Gerson is one of the really good ones. That's one of numerous cures for cancer. Did he go to the Gerson Clinic in Mexico?
No, he was instructed, and he did all of this at home on his own. And he had stage 4 throat cancer.
Good on him.
He completely cured himself with Gerson therapy, and that's a fact.
Yeah. They do. They have a very high rate of saving people with Gerson. I've listened to Charlotte Gerson. I'm so impressed by her. She really knows what she's talking about. And her dad was a brilliant man. He was curing cancer in the 40s, but you never hear about it because they don't want people to be cured. They want people to die. And the issue, and this sounds completely bizarre, but the issue goes right back to Bilderberg Group, because Bilderberg says there are too many people on this planet.
Yes, there is a mass population
but the
lie,
thing
basically.
is,
There's a population lie in place because fertility's actually been dropping for the past 20 to 30 years at least. And you can see that on the Centre for Population Change. The Centre for Population Change put out a document on how they want to see fertility falling even further, but it's plummeted since the 1950s, and especially in the past 10 years. And there is a mass depopulation program in place through United Nations Agenda 21. It's all in their documents. They want to reduce the world's population to ideally 1 billion, but they're quite happy with about 3 billion at the moment. But that's about 5 billion that have got to go, and they're doing that through the NHS. We've covered this as well. A thing called the Liverpool Care Pathway. They said they'd stopped it. Of course not. No, they just rebrand it. If you go into hospital when you're over 50 now, they often put "do not resuscitate." And I know several people who've gone into hospital, never come out again, and they didn't have any major illnesses. Yeah,
I know, and I knew an old lady, and she went into hospital, and she wanted to come home, but she didn't. She was old, but still. But there's 7 billion people on Earth right now, and they want to reduce it down to 500 million, and they want those people to be slaves. So.
Well, are there going to be enough jobs in the police and the local authorities for these people? I think there probably are, actually, the way things are going, because the only people who are going to be left are administrators, because there's going to be no more self-employment. They're going to wipe that out, and everybody is going to be dependent or working for the state under the United Nations Agenda 21, and this is going into loads of different areas. But yes, mass depopulation is happening. That's a fact. All you have to do is look at the figures. Very simple.
Well, when you consider how many ways that they have of killing off people, and there's cures for everything. There's cures for Ebola. There's cures for Alzheimer's disease. There's cures for AIDS. There's cures, numerous cures for cancer. People do not have to die of these diseases. Just today, there was an article in the Huffington Post about Ebola. It seems like somebody died in Ireland who had been in Africa, and they're not sure yet whether he died of Ebola, but they'll know. Well, I sent the link to all my Irish friends, and said, here's the cure for Ebola. So not to worry, you can, if you get it, you don't have to, be all stressed out. You can cure it.
Just in rounding up there, what would you recommend for cancer cures? I mean, obviously there's different types of cancer, but it all comes down to malignant tissue. So,
yes, malignant tissue. Yeah, well, it depends on what stage it's in. If it's in stage 3, it's a little bit easier to cure than a stage 4. You have to have the appropriate protocol in order to cure a stage 4, because that is the most serious stage. And also, people normally go the conventional route, the surgery, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy route, which is the worst thing that people can do. If people are diagnosed with cancer and the doctor says, I want to do surgery, the person should say, let me think about it, instead of saying, yes, okay, because if they do surgery, then the doctors know that it will metastasize, but they don't tell their patients. And 81% of doctors won't do chemotherapy on themselves or their families. So why do they prescribe it for their patients? It's because they're getting money. And it's the same here in England. I've got an article that said that they're getting $64 million a year, the doctors here in Great Britain, for putting their patients on drugs. And of course, chemotherapy is a drug. But not only is it a drug, it's mustard gas. And Charlotte Gerson's actually said that in her video that she taped when she was here in England, that I've watched. That's about 3 hours long, that video. Excellent video that was taped, when she did a seminar here over a couple of days. The second day of which was when it was filmed and is on YouTube. So people,
I'd recommend that to anybody, because I've seen that Gerson therapy in action, and it was quite remarkable, because we all thought this guy was going to die. He thought he was going to die. He went on this strict Gerson therapy, and he's still here now.
And how many years has he lived now, Mark?
That's getting on for 8 years.
Yeah,
8 years,
good on. Yeah, this is common. There's the Budwig select Budwig diet. Budwig was a doctor in Germany. Brilliant diet using organic cottage cheese and an oil. I forget the name of the oil.
There's many specific.
And then there's the grape cure, which was devised by another doctor. I believe she was also in Germany.
That's a very interesting one, Arlene, because the black grape cleansing is very good. I tried it only for a week, but it did make quite a difference. But it's a very well-known thing in Eastern Europe, massive in Russia, I think. The black grape cleansing.
It's either red or purple grapes with seeds. Right. Yeah. And you get a masticating juicer, and then you grind the seeds then into like a mush, and you eat that, and that's all you eat, that and water, and that starves the cancer cells. They will not live in oxygen. Then you have other methods where you have like a Trojan horse. You put together bicarbonate of soda and maple syrup, grade B maple syrup, if you can possibly find grade B. I think Sainsbury's has it. And the maple syrup gets into the cancer cells and brings in the bicarbonate of soda. And the cancer cells love the maple syrup, but then the bicarbonate of soda kills them. So the best thing is to cause a cancer cell to revert back to being a normal, cell, because in that way you don't have a lot of rubbish for your liver to have to clean up. So
you remove it. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Yeah,
because when there's a lot of refuse of dead cancer cells, then the liver has to clean those up, and that's why on the Gerson diet they have the coffee enema, because the coffee enema gets rid of all those toxins from the liver, which it has to be done. In fact, Charlotte Gerson said that if you don't do the coffee enema, don't do the Gerson therapy, because it won't work, because it's killing the cancer cells. And then the liver, you can only kill so many at a time, because if you do 2 protocols, then that will kill too many cancer cells, and it'll be too hard on the liver. And your liver, you have to take care of your liver, because if your liver quits on you, you're a dead duck. You won't survive. Our liver
it doesn't get much worse than that.
I mean, liver is so important, but the main issue is the doctors do not know this, because when they go to medical school, all they're taught in this country, England, is surgery and drugs, nothing else. Now, in Germany, they are taught nutrition, and they have to pass a test on nutrition. But that's not the case here in England. You have only surgery and drugs. So that's all these people know. And that's why, when somebody survives, like your friend survived with the Gerson therapy, the doctor will say, "You're still alive?" And I'll bet you can say that about your friend, too, and his doctor.
Well, the interesting thing is this. Even while he was on the Gerson therapy, he was touring all around the country playing drums 5 or 6 nights a week. And afterwards, he's still doing it. So that's a great place to leave that, Arlene. Thanks very much for all that information tonight. It's been a very packed show. And
Thank you.
We'd like everyone to go to your website, truedemocracy.net. Can you just round up a bit for us, and anything else you want to say?
Yes, if people would be kind and log on to my website, and if you like what you see, send me an email. I have an email address right on the main page of my website, and send me an email. Just say, "Hi, Arlene," and I will send you goodies. They're all for free, because there's issues that I haven't even touched on tonight, one of which is financial, that I think everyone is interested in.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me this opportunity to speak with all your friends.
Thanks, Arlene, and we'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World. We'll see you soon.